You want to hear a series of really crazy things? I'm starting a newspaper in a town of 10,000 people. And let's go over the reasons why that's the craziest thing that you've heard today. First of all, there are no relevant newspapers. Name 5 relevant newspapers. If you're an American, maybe New York Times, Washington Post. And there's lots of newspapers, but they're mostly just leftovers from what a newspaper used to be. People aren't really used to paying for information anymore, so my whole life I have felt like I'm just on the wrong side of the divide between sane and insane, a crazy person and a regular person. It's like I am not a regular person, but if I try really, really, really hard, I can kind of pass as a regular person in just enough circumstances to get by. But of course, the line between regular person and crazy person becomes is eventually revealed to be not exactly what it seemed to be, especially when you notice that the world is changing and that the definition that we all shared of regular, well-adjusted person was really just a description of the very particular world that we lived in, the very particular and very unusual, in fact, unique, aberrant, non-maintainable period of history that we are exiting right now. If you want to print a newspaper, you either have to buy your own printing press, which is like $20,000, probably more, but I saw some that were that much, or you can use someone else's, and it tends to run at more than $1 a copy to print a newspaper every day. And I'm not actually doing that, but the reason that I'm thinking of what I'm doing as a newspaper is because it fills the role that a newspaper had. Are you familiar with the story of the Tower of Babel? In the Tower of Babel, the people of a civilization, I don't really remember the details, they come together and in pursuit of God, as they think of it, they build a tower that will reach to the heavens. They seek to build a tower to reach to the heavens so that they can live with God. This is the accomplishment that they are seeking to fulfill. And they actually do a pretty good job of it. They build a tower very, very high, not all the way to heaven, but they're getting pretty close when God curses them. And suddenly they find that none of them speak the same language anymore. They all speak different languages, and so they can no longer work together on this great project. And I've been thinking about that a lot recently because that describes very clearly where we are at in the West, or in the US at least, or really in the whole world. In 2025, we have this thing called the internet that connects everyone together. It's not a tower up, but it is a construction that connects everything together. We share one big domain of information now. And as that has happened, the thing that we have lost, that we haven't quite noticed that we've lost yet. Individually, some people have noticed, but as a collective, it hasn't hit home yet. We haven't felt the consequences of the fact that we have lost our shared language. And when you lose your shared language, you no longer are a community in a meaningful way. We do not speak the same language because even though we are all a part of this globalization experiment with the internet and everything, the result of that has been that the information landscape, the information environment that you exist in, the information that you consume, the news that you watch or read, entertainment, media, everything that you take in is totally separate from the people that you are closest to, whether they are your neighbors or your family or your friends. You might be familiar with the concept of information siloing, which is just that very thing, that we all kind of choose what to believe and what information to take in. And so that's what is one of the things that contributes to the polarization politically in the world today. Or from my frame in the US in particular, but we're all looking at the world through different lenses. And I live in a small town of about 10,000 people, but it's very much an internet connected town, as everywhere is. And so it's bizarre to even think what any of us have in common anymore, because we're all on the same internet, but we're not taking in the same things. We do not live in the same world. Our realities are very different. But there is a inexorable reality of the here, like the local, the actual physical space where you live, the people you can reach out and touch, the food that you can reach out and eat, and the water that you drink. That takes place in the material world. And so that is caught up in, but not subject to the same kind of information siloing or the breaking up of languages. No matter how much you might believe in whatever you believe in, and there's people all over the world with whom you can connect with who believe that same thing, you are actually tied to the people next to you. And it might not feel like it all the time, because we have these expansive supply chains where we get our food from the grocery store, but the food doesn't come from the grocery store. The food comes from the ground. And it doesn't take that much not that much needs to happen to remind you of that. It's easy to forget that at this very unusual period of history. It's easy to really truly believe that the food comes from the grocery store. But not a whole lot has to go wrong for you to realize that that was never really the case. And part of the reason I've always felt like I'm on the other side of crazy, my whole life as a kid even, is that I always have always had this feeling that things cannot go on this way, that there's this kind of fakeness or matrix quality to the world, and that it is unsustainable, and that it will come tumbling down in one way or another. I've never been able to take seriously the idea of planning like a career based on, the economy of the 2000s. And it has persisted. It has surpassed my expectations to get us to this point. But the longer we go on, the more and more it feels that way, that there is an imminent reckoning, which sounds like a bad thing. And there's a lot of danger in it, for sure. But it's also like a kind of a return to truth. So you don't have to think of it, or you should not think of it, as merely good or bad. It's just inevitable, I guess. It's always felt inevitable to me, but now it feels really inevitable. Because we all kind of believe in the economy as it exists, because the food keeps showing up at the grocery store, and the Amazon packages come to our house, and the lights turn on, and the internet works. So we believe in it. But when you ask people questions, it doesn't take long to realize that nobody really believes that what's happening is legitimate or sustainable or that it's going to get better. It's hard to find people who really believe that. And nowadays they tend to be like AI utopians. Those people are really crazy. I hope they're right to at least some extent, maybe, but so it's a very strange thing to decide in 2025 that I need to start a newspaper in my town. And like I said, I'm not actually printing newspapers, but the reason that I am stubbornly insisting on conceptualizing it as a newspaper is because that is the role that it fulfills. So back in the day before the internet, when newspapers were relevant in terms of like the information economy and tenable in terms of the money economy, the reason that they had the role they had is because, unlike with the internet now, the newspaper distributes information to the community. And in doing so, it sort of creates the community. It sort of defines or uncovers the identity of the community. And if your community has a strong, coherent identity, it also has a orientation. It can have goals and visions and principles. But if your community, whether it is a town or business or even a family, if your community does not have a coherent identity, then it cannot really have an orientation. It cannot have like a vision. So something that I've been thinking a lot about as I'm working on the newspaper is that in a town like this one, there is a leadership structure that has existed for a long time. It is like the city government. You have the mayor and the council and the police and the fire department and the utilities and the roads and all that. And that is a necessary and important form of leadership that exists and needs to be well stewarded. They're like stewards of the town. But what is not included in that aspect of leadership, which is kind of what we implicitly think of as leadership in our current moment, we think of, the city leadership as the city government. But what's not included in that is a vision, or like the kind of leadership that can be visionary, or that can chart a course for the future, or that actually believes in things that are greater than efficiency. So the metaphor that I've been thinking about is, if your organization or your city is like a bunch of people in a vehicle together, a car, the city government is like the people who are charged with maintaining that car. And it's their job to make sure that things don't fall apart, to anticipate problems that might come up in the future, to do all of the regularly scheduled maintenance, and to solve problems as they happen in the present. But what's not included in that metaphor would be the question of where the car is going. Is it going anywhere at all? And how are we to decide where to take it? And like I was saying with the newspaper, that question of orientation, where are we going, that can only be decided if you have an identity, those two things are connected: identity and orientation. And we tend to think that's actually like a religious question, historically speaking, and in the present too. But the whole thing with the present is we don't have any of that. So we still have religions, but they don't have the same juice. In the US, we like nest our religion inside of the government or like the Constitution. And there were good reasons for doing that, but fast forward to 2025 and we have a lot of really nice cars with no destination, or that they don't even like realize how to turn the car on. They can't even conceptualize what it would mean to have like a vision for a future. And like I was saying with the inexorable, there's a good phrase that I can't quite come up with right now, but like the fact that the people that you're near to, the people that you have proximity to in the actual material world, the people and the things that you're close to are important. And we've lost sight of that because they haven't seemed important for so long, because we get most of our interactions, most of our life is online or online adjacent. But there is a reality that you can't really argue with about the importance of the local. And so in times of trouble or uncertainty, that will become very obvious in ways that will make it difficult to ever even remember how you could have forgotten it in the first place. So in our Tower of Babel moment that we're living through right now, like all of the world is coming together in the form of the internet and sharing knowledge with one another and all the other things we do with the internet. But notwithstanding the possibility that some people may choose to like upload their consciousness and go full transhuman, that is not actually what it means to be alive. That Tower of Babel thing. We're going to have to come down to earth in some sense. And so we're going to kind of gradually, and this process has very much begun, but it's going to happen in waves. We're going to gradually wake up to the fact that the local is important. And that if you don't have a coherent identity with the people around you, then you don't have many options if things don't run smoothly. So, for example, a lot of people are worried about things going haywire, and so they become like preppers, or they live off the grid and they grow their own food and they store food underground and they have cows and bunkers and all that. And that's a coherent kind of response to anticipating things going wrong. But I would say that it's actually not the right response. Certainly not to try and do that by yourself. It's we're social creatures, and to the idea that you're going to make a life for yourself by like canning food in a bunker underground, even if you somehow make that work, it's not a good life. And so the real investment that you want to make, and it just kind of seems obvious, is in having a social network of people who you can reach out and touch, who you can trust and who can trust you, and who you can share a vision with, who you can kind of come together and form an identity with. That's the form of prepping that would actually have a chance of actually working. I do wonder sometimes if the feeling that everything is about to come crashing down is just my own psychological insecurity or whatever. And to some extent, that does actually play a role. But it's not just mine. It's kind of where we're all at. Like I said, we believe that things will continue the way they have continued. But if you start asking someone questions about the economy, or well, that's a good place to start, but really about anything, you'll find that people really don't believe what they say or think they believe. Think of it in terms of politics too. It's very difficult to find anyone who is optimistic in terms of politics about the future of this country. That's whether you're talking about like the federal level with the country, or their local government or their state government. It's so baked into our reality that it's hard to even imagine a world where people weren't always cynical and upset about politics. It's hard to imagine a world where people could be optimistic about the course of their society. But that's not a crazy thing. That's not crazy at all in terms of like a longer time scale in history. We just happen to be living in a time when things are in a steady state of decline. And people understand that. Even if they don't realize what they understand it at a deep level. And that's why people are always unhappy with everything politically. That's not like some natural state of man. That's just how things are now, because we all are kind of tuned into the fact that what we're doing, what we collectively are doing, is not right. It's not going well. It's not going to last. And so there's this like groundswell now of people who are in all kinds of forms and fashions becoming more in touch with spirituality, whatever that might mean to different individuals. People are becoming more religious, more spiritual. They're doing practices and studying things that they wouldn't have in the past. And some of that takes the form of like psychology, people trying to heal. That's a part of that too. And all of that healing, for someone like me who's always felt like they're on the other side of crazy, has led us, many of us, to a point of feeling like the only choice that you're making, that you've ever been making, in some sense, and this can be conceptualized different ways, but is whether or not to trust your instincts, or whether or not to listen to God. Again, it's conceptualized in different ways. But every spiritual tradition, in its own way, encourages or seeks to embolden you to trust. Some of them would explicitly not say to trust yourself, but to trust God. But some of them would say to trust yourself, and by which they mean trusting intuition, which is not necessarily different than trusting God, unless you're a super hardcore theologian, in which case never mind. But the point is, as you grow and heal, or if you prefer, as you develop your relationship with God, you notice that acting out of love, acting in this intuitive way, not second guessing yourself all the time, has always been what you were supposed to be doing. And that once you start doing it, it doesn't necessarily make everything easier, but you can feel the rightness. But then you also have that what would other people think voice, which gets louder and louder the more you try and tune it out. And so for me, I find myself back in the town that I grew up in, starting something that I conceptualize as a newspaper, even though it's very difficult for me to explain to people how it's going to work. But nonetheless, as I'm doing it, in a lot of ways, it's working even better than I expected. It's like the path is laying itself out before me, but only I feel like I need to be able to see 20 steps ahead, but I can only ever see one step ahead. But then when my foot lands on that solid ground unexpectedly, it's like, oh yeah, of course it was going to. But then the faster you get going, the more scary it is. I think everyone knows, or at least most people know, that things are about to change in a big way, even though almost everyone acts the opposite. We act like it's going to continue the same way forever. And I certainly think that panicking is taking a step in the wrong direction. And funnily enough, the best thing you can do, if you're not sure or if that makes you feel afraid, is to just kind of allow yourself a moment or several moments to sit and be still and open your heart or whatever. I guess if anyone's actually watching this, I should be more specific about what I'm doing. The reason I started talking in the first place. I'm starting this newspaper thing. And what it's actually turning out to be, I think, is almost like a merger of like what we call like influencer culture on the internet, and then what a newspaper used to be at a local level. So everyone who is doing YouTube or social media and trying to get big, they are trying to collect a larger share of views from the whole world. And so what might seem unintuitive, but what is actually really important right now, I think, is to reverse course entirely and take that medium and focus it on the local. Because the local, not because necessarily, not for economic reasons, because obviously there's a pretty low ceiling on how successful you can be in terms of like numbers if you're only targeting a very small group of people. But the local, everywhere, the local has been so neglected for the last 5 decades or so that there's actually, it's like very undervalued if you want to think about it in like investor terms. There's a lot of potential there. And I'm not really talking about money, although I do think it can be made to work and that it has to be able to work. But in terms of like social capital, like I was talking earlier about, instead of, if you want to plan for the future, instead of lining up green beans in a bunker in your backyard. You're better off to invest in the people around you so that when the need does arise, you have a network of people that you can trust. And in doing that, you're not just helping yourself, you are helping yourself, your future self, but you're also doing a huge service for those people who, like all of us, have become less and less connected with each other and have sort of not even noticed it and have no idea what they've lost or how it went missing in the first place or how to get it back. And they're in that car together, but it's just sitting in the parking lot. They don't know where the destination is. And it's hard to imagine any kind of better future than what we have now, other than if you believe that like living on a server on a satellite orbiting Neptune, if that's your idea of a better future, maybe not. But other than that, it's hard to imagine a better future than what we have now, other than one that is achieved by reintegrating like the local social fabric of wherever you happen to be, or wherever you end up. Strange things happening. Trump just announced this 50-year mortgage thing. And that's just so insane. It's funny. It's so like bleak, but it's funny. But the Tower of Babel will come crashing down. Not necessarily because of engineering errors, but because of the language problem. And so I would recommend you start focusing on the language problem because it is solvable.